So I had this idea that I could continue to talk about the relationship of empiricism, empiricism to pornography. And I actually read a book about pornography, and it apparently started in was it the 15th or 1600s? It originally took the form of novels. Well, according to this book, which would fit conveniently with my idea of when empiricism started. I guess that would be more like in the late 1600s to more like 1700s, really. Uh, it's so funny when his people, take such interest in expressing their knowledge of a certain period in relationship to time. Uh, anyway, I know I've played this kind of game in my head where I look at pornography in terms of its empirical value or lack thereof, and it's just a really funny game to play. Uh, though funny might not be the right word to describe it. It's kind of like I think it's here's how the game goes. Maybe it's not a game; it's just like a philosophy or whatever. But it starts with the idea that sex is natural, and given it's probably really similar to this, uh, the pretext of this movie by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who's one of my favorite actors. The Don John movie. That A, sex is natural, and B, its representation in society is repressed. And because it's repressed, then it's natural that, no, because it's repressed, it is natural and it's healthy for a person to search for it and look at it. Um, but that whole logic operates on the empirical within the empirical system or the empirical worldview, uh, which Freudianism um, operates in as well. I think Carl Jung is even worse than Freud because I mean Freud I think is faulty in terms of not realizing or maybe he was a bad guy in some ways. I mean he if you look at him in terms of at least a empirical view of what determines what is good and bad and evil and whatever. Uh he was probably a bad guy in some way, because he created his ideas as a function of empiricism. The idea of the unconscious was born of forces of that day and age of social Darwinism in many respects. But I think Carl Jung is even worse than Freud because he he basically rebels against the rebellion and therefore his whole philosophy is just so uh lacking in any kind of historical uh accuracy, to the extent that history is understood or not understood in terms of its relationship to empiricism. And yeah, I just really don't like Jung. I mean, it's kind of pointless, because it's like, Freud is just as useless, or built into the matrix, if you want to look at it that way. It's kind of like the same thing. Uh, though the Matrix is kind of like is a funny film trilogy, in that it's almost, yeah, I mean, it's about the same thing in some sense, but being stuck within. Oh, I guess this is what is funny about the Matrix, is that the people that are outside of the Matrix are still within the empirical world. Like the architect in the first movie, I think it was. Um, and I guess you could say he was just an invention of the Matrix, because I think that took place in the Matrix. So I mean, it's not a perfect story by any means of reflecting one's historical relationship to empiricism. Um, but it's interesting that that guy. It's, well, I don't know if it's interesting, but the actor who played the architect of the first film resembles the steel baron from the 19th century, who built all the libraries. I'm forgetting his name. I read his book, The Gospel of Wealth, which I kind of liked in some ways, but which is still, he was definitely a man of his time. It wasn't J.P. Morgan. It was Carney. No. Oh, it's sad. This is a imperfect video, but anyway, I guess I started talking about Freud and how I don't even know where I'm going with this now. Uh, but Freud being imperfect, his philosophy of the unconscious being a, it's like ideas are not outside of the conditions of the period in which they were born, and the unconscious is an idea born of social Darwinism and the Industrial Revolution, in which many of people's agrarian identity was split into the city. And that is actually so true in so many ways. Like, so many people's lives are split in terms of, on some level. I mean, it's still within the empirical model, so it's like a split within a split already. Uh, but the people's lives are split in many ways. Like, they have, well, I'm living in it. I'm living right, through the line itself, living in Port Hadlock versus Port Townsend. Like, people people don't know where their food. I mean, you could go to the farmer's market or whatever, but there's like, and that's helping the situation in some sense. Who knows, it might be good. Uh, But most people don't kill their own food. They don't grow their own food. A great part of their identity, their survival socially happens in another place or outside of their day-to-day concerns. And you could say that that's happened. I think this is maybe the point I'm trying to make is maybe that's happened all through history, is that someone might be farming their rice or something, their corn, and the rain that comes to them may have come from hundreds, thousands of miles away. Or the wind brings air that's from very far away. It doesn't the means of their life, they may not never know the origin of, in some sense, or be aware of it. I mean, I'd say that is very similar to my life in some ways. I guess one could say that there is a sort of, well, I hear, what's his name? Jung had the idea of the common unconscious, or what is it? The subjective unconscious. Anyway, that everyone has this common. I'm just making now. I'm the one that's okay. The hypocrite, I guess, but or maybe that's not the point. But people have this consciousness, or that they all sort of operate with, or something. And I'm just totally making this up. I'm not even representing the words of Jung here. So whatever I'm saying is up, for its own debate beyond what Jung was saying. But I maybe there's no point in complaining about Jung. I think living in Port Townsend, it's so obvious. There's these people who are big fans of Jung, and they think that somehow, just because they believe in such concepts as the collective unconscious and things like that, that somehow they're outside of the empirical model. And that may not even be true. Maybe they don't even think that. But it's more like, I mean, maybe I just, I don't know. I guess I have been very judgmental towards such people because I'm looking for identity and to fit within the empirical world. And one identity can be one of antagonism or opposition to unperceived hypocrisy of individuals operating under the Jungian idea of the collective unconscious, or archetypes, or things like that. Like, I don't know. I think those people, they think that they're beyond politics or something. They think that they're beyond, and therefore, or they, a lot of people still use Freud in terms of their politics, whether it be feminism or whatever. And I think that's flawed in and of itself because of what I've already said, that Freud was working within an empirical model and he was just making a new division that was already occurring. And he's wanting to make money and talk to women or whatever. And he was reacting to his times. And you know what is, well, I don't know, I think is fishy about Freud, and I think a lot of people sense this, is that he knew that he was just uh, reacting to the conditions of his time. That's maybe why he killed himself too, is because he realized that he knew better or something. I don't know. Uh, I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but I mean, I think about that myself sometimes. I mean, just like making these videos. I mean, what's the point of making these videos? I mean, I think I've had the idea that, like, I mean, I don't even know if anyone even watches these videos, but I have the idea that I'm like, I've had the idea that I'm like, somehow contributing, ironically, okay, probably, to uh the empirical system, using the empirical system against itself or something like that, to comment on the condition of there being an empirical system. And sort of like just making these videos as a way to, you know, let off steam or whatever. Let off steam, which is something, a term, saying, I wonder if that started in the Industrial Revolution. May have. May have indeed. And, maybe the computer turns off and I feel like this is another little aesthetic technique I've been doing, is I'll stop talking when the computer shuts itself off. Like I'm not trying, yeah.